Hey, thanks for stopping back by and checking out the Minutemen Initiative. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about small unit sustainment. Really important topic, and it's an important discipline and overall capability to understand. And some of it's really basic, and some of it you gotta think about the overall bigger concepts. And we're bringing in a really special guest for this, Blake Flannery, also known as Blake Water on Instagram. He is a former Marine Force Recon guy and got a ton of experience with small units and small unit tactics and small unit sustainment. He also works with Orion Training Group and runs some of their training courses that have to do with the same skills and concepts. So we are honored to have him on, and we sit down with him and have a fantastic discussion on individual gear in that same realm, and then being overall sustainment minded as a team. So really enjoyed this episode. It was fun to talk with Blake, and I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Jump in here, start the conversation, start getting into it. So first and foremost, we've got a guest today, and I'm pretty excited to introduce Blake Flannery. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for making the time to jump in here and talk some stuff. So we're going to be getting into some small unit sustainment and kind of everything surrounding that, a little bit of gear, different things like that. But before we get too far along, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your background and who you are and what you're doing, what you got going on, that way everybody kind of knows. I feel like you're a pretty known figure. We got balloons flying in the Zoom. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. But yeah, so I'm Blake Flannery, and I did 20 years in the United States Marine Corps. The vast majority of that within Force Recon. I retired from the Marine Corps in 2021, and since then I've been working primarily with Orion Training Group through my small company, Maneuver Training Solutions. So work with OTG, do some small classes in my local area through my company, and then I also work a contract locally supporting some specialized folks in the United States Coast Guard.
Very
nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So full retirement then or you did the full time then, retired from the Marine Corps. It takes a brave person, man. It's a special person to make that happen.
Yeah. It was, the first couple of times I re-upped it, it felt very right. And it was what I'd always wanted.
Yeah.
After that, hit 12 years, it was like, this is going to drag out. This is going to be rough making it to the finish line. And there were a couple of times that I definitely considered not going all the way to 20, but I ended up pushing.
Yeah. I feel like once you get beyond that 12-year mark, it's worth it. It's like you might as well just stick it out. Honestly, I think once you get over 10, it's like,
yeah, you're halfway there.
I got a bunch of buddies that ended up getting out around that 10, 11 mark. And I'm like, man, you're already over halfway there. You should have just stuck it out. But at the end of the day, it's like if you want to get out, you want to get out. So, but
yeah, there were a lot of guys getting out at like 15, 16, 17 years when they started offering that early retirement. And the Marine Corps was touting about going back to a peacetime Marine Corps. And people were like, no, I don't think I want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
A peacetime Marine Corps. Ugh.
Yeah. I remember I heard that, and I was like, that was the first moment that I felt like truly afraid.
Yeah.
Was hearing that phrase. I'm like, that's not a mindset that I want encouraged. So it was a rough transition during that time frame. But
man, yeah, and it's weird because with stuff like that, I mean, we're both Army guys, so I don't really know how the Marines worked, but for the Army, it's like being infantry, being combat arms. It's like, when you go overseas or you're training or whatever, you're doing your job. But then when you don't, when no training's happening or no deployments are happening or whatever, you're just in this weird garrison like structure where they're just obsessed. Like the powers that be are obsessed with just the dumbest stuff. You're doing weird, inspections and ceremonies and the dog and pony shows in full form. So I could only imagine what a peacetime Marine Corps would turn into. But
yeah, we called them the garrison cult. And so now it's like, oh, there's no more deployment to combat. Well, then you don't even need to train for combat if you're not about to immediately deploy to combat. So let's do all this other silliness. Let's focus on all the silly things because the garrison cult members have no MOS proficiency or aggression. They just have boot blousings and haircuts.
Yeah. And sharp DNC, dude, just ripping around the post.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, cool. So, what made you not to go too much into your background, but I'm just curious, why'd you pick the Marine Corps out of all the branches?
It was just always a thing that I had wanted. And, when I was a kid, it's just like, it's the Marines, it's like this cooler name, this cooler title. And I also thought that a Marine was like, could do everything. And that's like how I reasoned it in my head as a kid. Is like, oh, a Marine can like drive a ship and fly a plane and drive a tank and shoot guns. Like, you do everything.
Yeah.
And so that just like really, like, I want to do everything. Obviously, as I got older, I learned more about it. And I was it was like week to week, I would kind of change my mind when I was like 15, 16 years old. Like, well, maybe I should like go be a Ranger first, and that'll better prepare me for like boot camp in the Marine Corps. And I thought about being a SEAL, but I ended up just choosing the Marine Corps ultimately.
Nice. Yeah. And then where along the way did you end up getting into the reconnaissance side?
Well, so that was part of like the whole, when I made the decision was sitting in a class and talk about the F-117 that had been shot down, it was Kosovo. And a kid sitting in front of me, he was like, big military buff. He was like, oh, they'll probably send Force Recon. And I'd never heard of Force Recon before. I'd heard of the SEALs and I'd heard of Green Berets. So I'm like, what the hell is Force Recon? He's like, well, it's kind of like Navy SEALs, but it's the Marine Corps' version of Navy SEALs. And I was like, oh, the Marine Corps has a version of SEALs? Like, they have to be fucking awesome. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go do that. Like, that's the way to do it,
Yeah.
And then so I just started kind of researching it, as best I could with what was available on the internet. That was like 1997, 98. And just kind of went all in on I want to join the Marine Corps and make it to Force Recon.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah, it's a tough thing to get into. So it's kudos to you for making it happen, man. It's,
Thanks.
Things that it's a title that few have. So, and then, you did your career, and then at what point along the way did you decide to start your company?
Well, right as I was going on terminal leave, right before I retired, I made a post. I cleaned out my locker entirely, cleared off my desk, and I made a post. And Jared Arsenault of OTG reached out. He's like, hey, here's my number. Give me a call. All right. So I gave him a call. And he's like, hey, dude, do you want to come work with OTG? I was like, yeah, sure. Kind of just lost my job. So, yeah, I'll come work with OTG. Like, that sounds good. And so part of the whole deal was I had to create an LLC. And that way, he wouldn't pay me, he would pay my LLC. So money just moves from business to business.
Yeah.
And then through my LLC, I got liability insurance.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, like that sounds easy enough. And I did not want to make my own business. It's like I don't want to run a business. I don't want to do any of that. But I had so many people messaging me like, do you have classes? Do you do private training? How much do you charge? Can you do this? Do you train that? Like, where all these people are asking for it that are like from the area. And I have a growing popularity on social media, and now I'm involved with this other company as a growing popularity. So it's like, screw it. What's the worst going to happen? If I get no customers in the first year, then I shut down the website and I just don't do it again. But I made a website and I announced a handful of classes, and I get pretty regular attendance. I haven't sold out a class yet, and I've only had a handful that come close to capacity, but I'm fortunate enough that everything kind of works out, that the logistics aren't crazy. So as long as I get one student, the class pays for itself, all the logistics and range fees and everything. So if I get one student, I hold a class, and
Cool.
That's awesome.
one dude gets trained. Yeah, that was the main reason for creating the LLC, and then actually setting it up. So I just do my own small local classes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned that we're an LLC as well, and I've learned with LLCs and just business ownership in general, it's like you're basically just moving money around. It's like it's just silly sometimes how crazy it can be with that, but they're I think they're a good structure to be in.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your Instagram, and that's probably where most people are going to know you from. How'd that start? Did you just kind of go for it, or?
Effectively, yeah. I was doing a training event, and I don't know, maybe 2018, and he was a retired Army Delta guy, and he was putting together a training DVD. And he was kind of funny. He kept like apologizing to us because he felt silly like taking pictures with his phone. But he's like, yeah, I got to do this for Instagram. And everybody made some jokes, but we were actually like, so what's up with the Instagram thing? He's like, well, my publicist said that no one knows who I am, so I have to have a face out there so people know who I am, so they have reason to buy the DVD. And I was like, huh, okay. Well, it's better to learn from others. And so I was like, well, that's something that maybe I need to start looking at, is like social media. And I got on Instagram and started looking and realizing all these companies are marketing on social media. So at a very minimum, like I should learn how to leverage the platform, because I might be trying to submit a resume and get on with one of these companies. And if I can show them that I know how to use social media, I can put that on my resume. And it just, I don't know. I just can't like post random stuff. Everything kind of has to have a lesson to it in order for it to make sense to me about why I'm bothering to put information out there. And a couple of people kept telling me I should go public with it, because I was still at a private page. I wasn't sure how to handle having a public facing page and still being active duty, but eventually I was like, well, what's the worst going to happen if I just, hit this little button and go from private to public? And it just kind of took off.
Yeah.
And it just kind of took off. And I just kept really like hammering down on the instructional aspect of it and trying to make everything as educational as possible. And I guess the rest is history with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I think it's cool to see kind of where we're at as a culture, because people are so hungry for this, just basic fundamental knowledge in these areas, and to have somebody like yourself with a ton of experience just share basic tips and tricks and things you've learned along the ways. I mean, it's invaluable. It's something that you're not able to get unless you do it for years, or, you seek the wisdom of someone that already has, and then you're able to kind of figure out things that, as I'm sure you along the way you've done things you're like, oh, that sucked, and you want to let people know, do it this way instead, And it's kind of like,
I've learned the hard way many and many a time. And so that's, a big part of it is like, if I can get people to like not start on the ground floor, like maybe I can get people to start on like the third floor or maybe the fifth floor if they're like actually attentive and, reading captions and things like that.
Yeah.
That was kind of a hope behind it all too.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's awesome. I think it's I really enjoy your page, and there's things that, you bring up that I'm just like, man, I made it through my whole career without even knowing that, just little things here and there. And it's cool. So, no matter what level you're at, I think it's there's little gold nuggets all throughout. So,
yeah, you can never learn enough, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I think to constantly be learning, regardless of what stage you're at, you could be a professional and been doing it your whole life. There's still something you can learn from someone. So,
yep.
I think constantly being willing to learn is getting in that mindset super important. But
yeah, definitely.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, we're going to kind of jump into the meat and potatoes here. If you're ready to cruise into it and start talking a little bit about something that I think, and it's an area that I think a lot of people should pay attention to. I think people focus a lot on like, all right, what kind of plate carrier do I need? What this and that, and I need to build a new AR and all these things. But even just from us doing the podcast, as long as we have now, we're starting to notice a trend in questions, and it's very team-based stuff. It's like, hey, I've got a group of guys, we've bought our gear, we've been training together, but how do we actually go to the next step and make this thing effective? And a huge part of that to me right away is like, well, sustainment. You got to understand how to maintain effectiveness. You got to understand how to simply survive and stay alive. And it's pretty cool that that's something that you seem to be very focused on. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of it comes from your experience doing force recon work and stuff like that. So yeah, I thought it'd be a great topic to get into and plug away at.
Yeah.
But
yeah. It was just something that we came up with. So when I first came on with OTG, Jared was like, could you offer some kind of class, that's more attuned with your experience outside of CQB? I was like, yeah, I can absolutely put together, patrolling 101 type classes. And so we started with the small unit maneuver class, which is 3 days. It's patrolling 101, formations, hand and arm signals, principles of patrolling, your different patrolling disciplines like light, camouflage, sound. And we were doing the very first iteration of it. It was actually a private class in Illinois. And he was like, it'd be really great if, we're doing this a couple times and maybe next year or even in 24, we start prepping to offer like a 5-day class, and you could actually take people out and stay overnight in the woods for a couple nights and work more on like fieldcraft. And I was like, yeah, like that's definitely doable. Because it's my background and spent like almost 8 years as a instructor between teaching the basic reconnaissance course, reconnaissance team leaders course, and close quarters battle, spread out. So I was very aware of like what it takes and the structure that has to go around, an event like that. And I was like, I don't know. Like, we got to be really smart with how we do it because the environment has to be right. It's like we did Pennsylvania in June, and now we're doing Texas this November. So like we're not going anywhere where it's like super hot or super cold.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, it'd be so much fun to do this class like in February and in the snow. I'm like, you say that.
Yeah.
until I take you out to the field.
Yeah.
And we're like a kilometer and a half into the movement, and you're like, I'm already tired, I'm cold, I'm already wet, and I've got 48 more hours until I can go back and get warm.
Yeah.
And like that changes things. Like I was a little hard ass when I was in high school, and I, walk from school to work, which is like all 2 miles in the snow, and just be cold. But I knew that I would get to work and that there'd be heat inside the building. And then, eventually I would get picked up and, brought home, and my home would be heated and I'd be fine.
Right.
But when you have to go out to the field and it's like, if you get cold, you're just going to stay cold.
Yeah.
And it changes your outlook, and then it goes from, well, it's easy to be hard, but it's hard to be smart. So, we put together, and he was like, well, do you want to just see if we can do it in 23? Like, we'll set it up. And I was like, yeah, man, let's see if we can set it up. And we found, Jared rather found Ben Franklin Range up there in PA. And we did a class back in January. And I was like, yeah, dude, this place will work out perfectly for this 5-day version of the class. And so we set it up and announced it, and it was a hit. A lot of people wanted to come out and get that style of training. And I'm more than happy to do it because it really kind of opens everyone's eyes up to everything that goes into it. It's not just an equipment thing.
Right.
And they do start realizing, like, yeah, I'm not going to put everything in my chest rig or everything on my plate carrier, or, I need belt kit because I have to carry, 48 hours of sustainment on my body. Like, that's not the point. But a lot of guys, it was eye-opening for them of the energy that it takes just to maintain your patrolling disciplines. Like, I have to use hand and arm signals. I can't just talk to this person. I have to use a hand and arm signal, or I have to be disciplined enough that when hand and arm signals are not going to be enough, I have to get up, close the distance with this person to where I can smell what they had for breakfast yesterday.
Yeah.
And very quietly and succinctly tell them what needs to be said. I can't just drop my pack and get something out of it. I've got to make sure that somebody is watching my sector of security, and I have to quietly get into my pack. And when it goes dark, I can't just pull out a flashlight. If I have any light, it's got to be a red lens, and then I have to keep it covered. And like, just maintaining all these little disciplines, like, wore the students out really quick. And they were like, it's a fun suck and it's a good suck. So it's not going to last that long, but like, this sucks.
Yeah.
They're like, this is rough. And I'm like, yeah, man. And, we're only doing it for 48 hours. And I would put them in what I would call a relaxed posture. It's like, all right, guys, like, for the next hour, just chill out, take care of your feet, do some basic hygiene, stuff like that. And then we're going to go back to full tactical. And an hour later, they'd be like, game on. And they did good about staying with it. But even with those like little breaks where they could be loud and talk to each other and joke and everything, it still wore them the hell out. So I do think it's a good eye opener. And I do think it's important to really start teaching just all the little things that go into being able to, take yourself out. And it's nice to be like in the woods, the principles and concepts would apply no matter what, if you're going on vacation. And just help people get a little bit smarter about how to sustain themselves for long periods of time without being able to just, go to the store and buy whatever you want, or, just walk down the hall and get something out of the medicine cabinet. It's like, I got to figure out like how to pack, just the bare minimum, and how to make that last and work for me for a long period of time.
Yeah. No, I think something you brought up was picking the right place at the right time. You're talking about the class. I think it's super smart not to have one extreme or another, whether heat or cold, because for a learning environment, it's already hard enough just to go do the thing. And then you throw someone into like extreme conditions, whether hot or cold, and it's like people start really shutting off like the ability to learn in those situations, because they're just like, man, I'm just
cold.
trying not to freeze, or I'm just trying not to die of like heat exhaustion. So I think it's best for the student that you guys are picking like good times of the year and kind of positioning that all over the U.S. I think it definitely benefits the student for sure. And I think small unit sustainment is going to continue to get more and more, just people are going to want it more and more. I think it's like we were talking about earlier, it's just growing. So anything we can, whether it's trainings or just information getting put out like on like podcasts or video content, or even short little clips on Instagram and things like that, the more that's out there, the better, so.
Yeah,
because I think, and we've talked about this before, like when we go out and do, different training courses or whatever, and some are overnight and different things like that. It's like you can't, there's so much that you're not able to just teach without actually going out for a long period of time and letting people kind of figure it out for themselves. Like those things, when you're out having to stay quiet, move quiet, hand and arm signals, you're living out of your ruck for a few days. It's like, there's going to be things that, you can read a bunch of books and listen to people and different things like that, but you got to figure it out for yourself. You kind of got to figure out like, oh crap, like, I don't want to have my poncho in this pocket, or, these boots are trash. Like, there's just things that you start to figure out that you're not going to figure out unless you go do it. And I think I think the community's starting to really dial in on that and figure that out. Cause I mean, the industry, I hate to say industry, the community is full of, it's very saturated with a lot of training and educational stuff and guys that have a ton of experience. And I think the next step for a lot of people is like, all right, let's go out and rip off the Band-Aid and just figure this out, be willing to fail, but try to learn, So that was one of the coolest things I saw about your guys' class, is that it's open to everybody, which was so cool. And yeah, I was stoked to see that. I was like, man, that's awesome. You don't have to have a background or something. It's open to anybody.
Yeah, that's the main goal with OTG, is that we offer open enrollment. It's for everyone. There's no email only, because it's tactical and, it shouldn't be taught to citizens. There's nothing wrong with somebody learning this stuff. And it really, benefits everyone, because now you have people who are going to come to a class like Small Unit Sustainment. They're like, wow, like that took a lot. There's a lot more that what goes into this that I didn't realize. And so I need to also work on all these other things. But on top of all the individual things that these people realize that they need to work on, they meet people in class, and you get put into a fire team. And it's like we just go outside and they don't realize that we're about to put them into fire teams. And it's like, okay, make fire teams of 4. And they all just kind of look around and they all just start like putting themselves into little fire teams and kind of looking at each other like, I don't know any of these people.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. And now for the next, 4 days, like you guys are a fire team. You're fire team 1, you're team 2, you're team 3. And like we'll rotate, whoever the fire team leader is, but now they actually have to learn how to be a team.
Mm-hmm.
And then within the teams, you have to learn to work together as a squad. And so you are building your own network by meeting these people and talking with them, having offline conversations, and then training alongside them. And you get, a little bit of trauma bonding, going through these experiences. And they exchange numbers, they exchange contacts, they keep in touch with each other after class. They start training with, they're like, oh shit, like we only live 2 hours apart from each other. Like we can meet at this one spot that's kind of like in the middle and, do a range day or some kind of training event, a couple times a month with each other.
Yeah.
And they do that. Like they follow through with it. And we encourage them to. We encourage them, like, a big part of it is that community building aspect of it, of meeting these people and recognizing that, we're not all alone by ourselves because we like guns and we like training, and, that we think it's okay to be prepared and capable. It's like there's a lot of people out there like that. There are a lot of people out there that think like me, and rather than us all trying to like kind of hide in our own corners and hope that we just get left alone, it's like, no, there's a lot of us, and we can be a community, and then as a community we can take things in the right direction. Right. So there's more to it than just showing somebody how to patrol and how to live out of their ruck for a few days, and it's really, really cool to see people like kind of dive into that aspect of it.
Yeah, the community focus is really cool too, because we hear it all the time. It's like, man, the hardest thing for me is I can't find people that are like-minded. I'm having a hard time finding people that are on the same page. And it's like, you go to a 5-day unit sustainment course, it's like you're finding like minds there. Like the kind of people that are showing up at a course like that, it's like you're probably on the same page. Someone that understands the value of that and is going to go do that, which is so cool. But yeah, I want to go take it, honestly.
I'd love to
find a way to fly down there. It's always hard for us to make it happen for stuff like that, just because we might as well be in another country, being in Alaska. But either that, or we got to get you guys, we got to host you guys, get you guys up here to the big AK and run some classes. That'd be sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like in the dead of winter, dude. No, I'm just kidding.
If there's a venue, I think Alaska might be a bit far for OTG at the moment, but nothing's impossible.
It's far for everybody usually, but it's cool. It's a cool place to be. It's beautiful here, and we actually have really like perfect weather summers. It's like 65, 70 degrees. Nice, but winters are a little wild.
I trained at the Black Rapids training site. I think that's what it was called, up there in Alaska.
Okay.
It's where one of the Army's mountain warfare schools is. I guess there's like one there and one in Vermont.
Yep.
For the Army. Yeah. So we spent like 2 weeks, I think maybe 3 weeks up there. One of my force platoons. So it was a great time. It was a little weird that like the sun almost never went down.
Okay. Yeah.
But
yeah, it
was a good time.
Yeah. Night vision's not a thing, really, up here in the summer, but in the winter it's everything though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was with the 501st, so I was stationed up at Rich. Black Rabbit, is that in Fort Greeley? Is that up like in
it was super isolated,
like Donnelly training area kind of area? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where we were from Anchorage, because I think Anchorage was like the next closest city, but it was still like 4 hours away, 5 hours away, something like that.
Okay. North, probably, I'm guessing. North of Anchorage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. It's a wild area up there, but we did our fair share up in that area. Oh, you pulled it up? What's it say?
It's Delta Junction.
Oh, Delta Junction. Yeah, so that is Fort Greeley. That's the big Army training area here in Alaska. That's like anytime we did a big like pre-deployment prep, we'd go out to Donnelly and stop around.
Nice.
Spend a month or whatever out there. But cool, man. Well, I think a pretty obvious place to start, and it's usually where individuals kind of want to start. It's your individual gear. And I really like the videos you do, which I'll link all of, for those that are interested in checking out Blake's stuff, I'll have it all linked in the description, as we always do, including some of these videos, because I think they're really well done and they go over some really good little details. But yeah, we thought it'd be a cool place to start, just talking about the different levels of kit.
Sure.
So yeah, if you just want to start talking individual and on body, we can start rolling through there.
Yeah, so it's a way that I have been breaking down equipment for a while. Most people are familiar with like the line 1, line 2, line 3 style.
Yep.
And the first time I ever heard that, I had a platoon commander who was trying to come up with a gear recipe, and it was insane because it involved like with Force Recon, we had our own equipment issue. So you had like big Marine Corps issue and like the interceptor flak jackets at the time, and those helmets, and then you had the full section battle equipment be issued to you at Force. So there was like a soft armor, looked like a second chance vest, and then like some different plate carriers. And he had one where like you would put on the soft armor, and then you would put on the flak jacket with the plates in it, and then you would put on a plate carrier from the Frisbee kit with plates in it. Whoa. And I was like, when I got that read off to me, I was like, dude, I was looking at my team leader like, are you serious? Like, we only have one set of plates, and that's because you only need one set of plates. I'm like, does he actually expect us to wear two sets of plates? I'm like, who are we fighting? Where am I going that I need a soft armor vest underneath a flak jacket with plates and then putting a plate carrier over that? Like, whoa. What the hell is going on? So, right off the bat, I was already like, this whole idea of like line 1, line 2, like this is stupid.
Yeah.
Like, not doing that.
What does it mean?
And then, like I kept, as like the years progressed, like I would hear this again. And so it would always remind me of that. And I'm like, oh, don't start that. Like it goes down this weird rabbit hole. Don't go there. But everyone's interpretation is almost always different.
Yeah.
And to the point of like, people are like, line 1 is everything you're wearing and your chest rig. And then line 2 is the belt kit you wear with your chest rig. I'm like, that's also confusing because like, so I just break it down with the items on body and, like the clothes that you're going to wear, the stuff that's going to go in your pockets. And then I include, the nut ruck, the fanny pack as part of that. So it's going kind of like the minimal, like you should probably not be stripped down any more than that, while you're out on mission.
Mm-hmm.
And, people have different ways they like to use their fanny packs. I prefer to use mine to like kind of control some of the pocket litter and my survival kit, so I don't have to have a bunch of different things in all my pockets. But Leatherman's, folding knife, compass, maybe a small handheld GPS or wrist-mounted GPS. Just little stuff like that goes on there. And then you have your fighting load, and that is your piece of equipment that's going to carry items for taking life and saving life. So mags, grenades, fighting knife, some minor admin things like navigation equipment. You're not going to necessarily use that specifically for a fight, though you could use it in a fight. Things that can facilitate, what you're doing. And then your medical radios, stuff that you're going to actually like use and access while you're in the thick of things. And that's where a lot of people take it too far, especially when you start getting away from like plate carriers, because with plate carriers, you've got plates and everyone's like, oh, my plates are heavy. Well, you should stop buying steel plates. But you're like, my plates are heavy, so I'm only going to put, a little bit of stuff on my plate carrier, and that'll be fine. But as soon as you give somebody a chest rig, they're either like, they want to go to a tiny little micro rig that has like nothing in it, but they put a rangefinder in a pocket and they call it recce. Or they want belt kit so that they can have, 3 days of chow and, 8 quarts of water and their sleeping mat and jackets. And it turns into like this whole sustainment thing. And then they put on a pack, and the pack has all that stuff too. And they'd be like, 2 is 1, 1 is none. It's like, okay, homie, but you don't need 2 sleeping bags.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need 2 sleeping bags. Like, you might need 1, or maybe not at all.
Right.
Like, we went out on the sustainment course, and they're like, what sleeping bag are you packing? I was like, none. What sleeping pad are you bringing? I'm not. And those are actually the video that we did for it. Those are probably the 2 biggest questions. People are like, where's your sleeping pad? Where's your sleeping bag? I'm like, yeah, dude, we're not camping. And I'm in temperate weather, so I don't need a bag. And then to top it off, if I'm all snuggled into a sleeping bag and our position gets attacked,
Yeah.
being snuggled in a sleeping bag suddenly turns into I am trapped in my sleeping bag.
Yeah.
So like, and that was a big thing I learned in recon is like, if you don't need a sleeping bag, you don't pack one. And even then, not everybody in the team is going to be asleep at once. So you might pack 1 or 2 sleeping bags and you just rotate guys through those sleeping bags. And then the guys who don't pack the bags are packing, extra water or extra fuel to melt snow, because that's the environment that you're in, where it's like it's cold enough that we should actually bring a sleeping bag.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the whole, I guess, roughing it idea. But yeah, so you have the fighting load, and that's equipment that is going to take life and save life, support your weapons. And then from there, as far as the class goes, it pretty much goes from that to the ruck. But within that, you have your assault load and your sustainment load. So the assault load is that which you can add to your fighting load in the form of like something as simple as a back panel that goes on your plate carrier, or a small pack, and it's going to contain mission essential items that are required for whatever the objective is. So if it's a reconnaissance task, that's where your laser range finder and spotting scope, and binos. That's your long range communications equipment, your camera. If it's an attack, that's going to be where your breaching tools are carried, and your spot exploitation kits. Extra water, extra ammo, and then maybe depending on the nature, some small things like maybe you carry your poncho in your assault loads. You have some kind of sheltering material. So if you assault and attack the objective and you clear it, now we're going to hold it, but you drop ruck in the attack position and things are just working out to where you're not going to get your pack for 24 hours. Like you've got just a bare minimum of like water and chow, and you can throw up that poncho as a piece of shelter or wear it to hold you over for that 24 hours. And then what are your skills? Like if you have the fieldcraft skills, now that 24 hours that would make most people miserable is just a minor inconvenience to you.
Yeah.
Then you have the sustainment load, and that is all the items which will sustain you. So that's the majority of your water, your food, hygiene kit, and your sheltering. And that's going to be, stuff that'll make like an actual shelter for you, like a tarp or a poncho, or maybe a tent or a rain fly. Then it's your layers, like what layers you actually need, for the environment that you're not going to be wearing all the time. So like if you're going to really cold weather and you need a puff layer, well, that's where your puff jacket and puff pants will be, inside that sustainment load. All your batteries, right? All the stuff that will sustain you, that will keep you in the field for long periods of time. Your means of procuring more water from the environment. If you can procure food from the environment, your means of doing so, if you need anything extra, would be in that sustainment load in your ruck. So try to break it down. It just seems a bit more plain and simple to think about it in those terms, instead of trying to figure out what line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 20 is supposed to be. And that's just how I've always worked it, and it's worked out for me in the military, and it seems to be more or less working out. Some people are like, well, what do you mean by fighting load, or what do you mean by assault load? But the concepts seem to be fairly easy to explain as to what they are.
Yeah, and I think it gives you I like it because it gives you room to set it up for your situation. Like like you said, the concepts are there. It's like, oh, well, for where I live and for what I'm trying to do, well, I can kind of categorize it how I need to, but the overall concept is laid out. And it's super simple. I agree. I think, that breakdown is just like, what more do you need? And the levels thing, I've never been a fan of that. I think it's very subject to interpretation. It's very misused as well. Like, you've got people out there that kind of partly understand those original, the original levels. When you start like first line gear and all that kind of stuff, it's like you got guys explaining it in a way that's making it even more confusing for people. We get asked all the time about the line, like the different lines and the different 1, 2, 3, all that stuff, and we're always like, oh, I don't know, we don't use that. But I was going to ask, so this method, is it something that you just kind of individually used, that you kind of found that worked for you in the military, or was it something that was kind of a part of your unit's SOP?
It's just something that was always, it's like every time you're going to go to the field, you guys probably experienced, like, the company would put out like a packing list for the field, and it was always broken down in that fashion. It's like, items on the body, this is what we expect you to wear. This is what we expect to be on your deuce gear. This is what we expect to be in your assault pack. This is what we expect to be in your ruck. And it's like, okay. And then sometimes it would just come down to like, well, do I have to have this in the assault pack? Or like, could I also put this thing in the ruck? Or, do I have to have this in the ruck? Because I think I'd rather have it in the assault pack because I'm going to use it more. But it's like, I understood exactly what was expected of me. And it was very plain English. Like, it doesn't need to be a brevity code, in my opinion. So I just kind of went off of that. And that's how every field packing list was presented to me. And even when I got into force, up until that platoon commander started creating that crazy SOP, the SOP, like my team leader handed me, it was like, items on the body, what goes into your nut ruck, what goes on the fighting load. And the big thing with it too is it was just like a generalization, have the capacity to carry 12 mags, 2 frags, an M-biter, a knife, an IFAC. This is what, components should be in the IFAC. And it was up to you to set it up, and so that's another important part of it all, is setting it up so that, no matter what the environment is, somebody can adapt it because they just understand the principles of what is supposed to go into that level of equipment. And so, if you're operating in a temperate environment and it's never below, 70 degrees, well, you don't need any warming layers. Yeah. So don't pack any warming layers, right? But if it's going to be raining a lot, well, then you're probably going to want to pack some kind of, rain gear. Whereas if you're going to be out in the mountains in snow covered environment, then you're going to want to pack extra layers. So that just comes down to understanding that environment and then packing appropriately for it. But you understand, like, where should I put what?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of funny when you were talking about like the, basically breaking down common sense, like, if you're not in super cold environments, you might not even need a sleeping bag, for example. It was, Steven was scout reconnaissance when he was in the Army, and
I was a wannabe. I was a wannabe what you are. I was nothing what you were.
All good, man. It's all good, man.
Yeah,
I'm not ever going to hype that up.
Lowercase reconnaissance.
All right, all good.
No, but we're both paratroopers, and so obviously a lot of stuff dovetailed. But when we were comparing notes on different things we did, and just when we trained together and stuff, he's like, "Whoa, dude, you're packing a sleeping pad?" And I was like, yeah. He's like, I've never used one in my whole career. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, because in Alaska, like, you have to have one or you'll die. So it's like, it's just such a different thing, but it makes so much sense, especially the sleeping bag thing. For me, training here, it's like you have to use a sleeping bag. So it seemed so foreign to me that,
yeah, we never used sleeping bags
even have
either.
One. He's like, yeah, dude, you just bust out the whoopee and just sit up and sleep. And I was like, oh, dude, you would turn into you'd be a White Walker out there for the rest of your life if you did that here. So,
yeah.
But it's just, and that's exactly it. It depends on what you're doing and where you're at and your situation. But I was curious. I was going to ask, kind of going back specific on body. What are some items that are just kind of like no brainers to you that you think might get overlooked?
I would say a good multi-tool. A lot of people will carry a pocket knife. That seems to be pretty like, yeah, I'm going to carry a pocket knife or a fixed blade, but a good multi-tool, because even though it's only the okayest of things, it's the okayest knife, the okayest screwdriver, and all that, you have all those things within that tool, and that was something even in garrison and just hanging out, I'd be like, everybody always needs to have a knife on them, and I highly recommend that it's a multi-tool, right? Like, got a multi-tool, a watch is preferred for a way of telling time, but if you just like hate watches, and then I'll accept you having your phone in your pocket as long as I don't catch you on it at inappropriate times. Something to write with and write on at all times. And those are like the basics of anywhere, whether it's like we're in garrison or we're going out to the field. And especially, I would say, as reconnaissance Marines, like that, having something to write with and write on, like you're there to observe, record information, and then report it. And so we don't keep patrol logs. If you're the guy at the radio, you got a comm log. So yeah, a good multi-tool, right in the rain pad. And then I would go with mechanical pencils a lot of times for the right in the reins.
Yep.
You can buy the super expensive pens, but they're unnecessary when you can just use a pencil. And that would be the kind of long and short of it. From there, it's like, well, where do you want to carry? The other stuff is, I would usually have a handheld GPS in one of my sleeve pockets and my compass in the other. Some guys prefer to keep their compass in a chest pocket. Some guys wanted to keep their GPS in their fighting load. So it's kind of pretty open to like where between items on the body and the fighting load, guys were could keep stuff if they wanted it. But like the knife and the notepad and all that was pretty much like, those need to be on you. And then as far as going into the field environment and making use of the fanny pack as part of that level of kit, would be a good survival kit inside that fanny pack.
Yeah, the fanny pack I think is kind of a power move, man. It's like it's something that I want to start implementing more and playing with, because it just makes so much sense. Like you made a point in your video where you said if you have chest pockets, you keep stuff out of it usually, because as soon as you put your chest rig on, it's like you can't get to it anymore. And that's a mistake I would repeatedly make, even in the Army. Like I'd always have stuff in my chest pockets and then be like, get your kit on, and I'd put my flick on and I was like, oh crap. Like, and you're trying to do the weird weave through thing and like, get to do origami just to get to your pouch or your notebook in your pouch. So that's where like shoulder pockets are awesome. Like nowadays I'm a huge fan of shoulder pockets. But yeah, the fanny pack or the nut rack. The nut ruck makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, it's something that I might start trying to play around with a little bit.
Another thing that's cool about the nut ruck, and something that we deal with up in Alaska, is like wintertime dealing with overwhites, or if you have to throw on like a Gore-Tex top or bottom, because it rains like crazy in Alaska. We deal with a ton of rain. It's something that you can just unclip, throw on whatever you need to throw on, and then put it back on the top layer again. So it makes it way easier than having to like try to empty out your pockets to move those items over to some other. I don't know. There's just the more you go out in the field and experience that type of thing, then it's like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense why this guy's doing this or this guy's doing that. So I think it's for sure a good concept. But
yeah, I got introduced to that when I got to recon, and we were still in our initial training, and we just saw we were in one of the bolt lockers, and we saw a couple guys walk in, and they were wearing flight suits, and they had fanny packs on, and we're like, that's why we're doing this, fellas. Flight suits and fanny packs.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Oh, dude.
The flight suit's a vibe as well.
Yeah, it is a vibe, man. It's so high speed.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. They're nice on ship. They lose their luster once you put full kit on underneath, and you're like, I am trapped in this garment, and it is not a comfortable garment to be in. Like, it's something if you have to fly in it, when you got to patrol and do operations in it, it's not the best, but it looked cool at the time.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing guys like, we'd be over in Afghanistan. We were just infantrying around, just being grunts, and then you'd see these high speed dudes like come through with their beards and, fanny packs and one piece flight suits. And we were always like, whoa. So yeah, but same thing. I was always told like, yeah, dude, it sucks when you're trapped in it and it's like just a sweatshop. And I was like, oh man, yeah, I could see that. But, yeah, now it's like, I feel like people are looking at it again. I feel like what's old is new again, like a lot of people are looking at all this gear and they're like, oh yeah, we need to go back to the old vibes.
But again, that's like where the fanny pack shines, because, if you have like this strict SOP set up where like, your multi-tool must go in this pocket and folding knife in this pocket, and this thing in this pocket, this thing in this pocket, and then you put on a flight suit. It's like, well, I don't have any of those pockets. I have these other pockets, but they're not made for a guy like me. They're made for a guy in an airplane. Like, what do I do now? It's like, well, if you have your fanny pack, you stick everything in there, and that becomes your pockets.
Yeah, that's sick. Cool. Anything else on individual kit before we move out of that section?
No, I would just harp on like, understand what each level of kit is meant to do for you and just let it do that. Like, don't try to warp it into something else. A lot of people still, especially in the medical side, I'll get guys who are like EMTs or paramedics, and they're into, this community, and they're like, yeah, how do I modify my kit to make up for not having a military logistics system? I'm like, dude, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't modify your equipment any way, shape, or form to try to recreate a logistics system. Like, you have to have a logistics system for a logistics system. It's nothing you can do equipment wise. I'm like, there's a million different ways to carry medical on a plate carrier. I can get a dangler pouch and a barrel roll one, and I can put one behind my plate, and you could put another one on your belt, and you could get some core survival med mags, and like, you could carry a shitload of them, but why? Why would I carry 10 IFACs to say that I have medical sustainment? Because that's not actually medical sustainment. That's just a shitload of IFACs.
Yeah.
Sustainment would be like drugs and antibiotics and, things that go into long-term care, and that's going to go into a pack. And so that's where you have like your assault load is, what are those, mission essential, most immediate items? And then you have the sustainment load. So just break your kit up, understand what it's going to do, and then start looking at like, well, maybe you shouldn't always be away from your pack. Maybe you should always have that assault load pack with you, because it does have some of those things that will help you if you do get stuck in a situation where you got to hang out for 24 to 48 hours. You've got that bare minimum, just keep you going until you can get back to, your main pack, or maybe your vehicle is your sustainment load.
Yeah.
But something to get you back to that, and then setting it up appropriately.
Yeah. So, I guess just confirmation for those that may have not caught it, but when you say your assaulting bag, are you talking like a kind of a detachable, smaller bag that you can have in your ruck? that's got your essentials in it, or you can kind of mix match whatever and then pull it out, put it on.
Yeah,
if you're gonna ditch your ruck.
it can really be anything, right? It depends on what you need to carry. It could be as small as like a bandolier, right? If you're like going super bare minimum, it's got like a couple extra mags, maybe it's got a little bit of weapons cleaning kit, and like you just have the absolute bare minimum attached to it because maybe you already got water on your fighting load, right? Mm-hmm. Or it could be like a 2-day bag. That's the thing I'm really bad at is like the cubic inches of packs. People always ask me like the cubic inches of packs they should get for things. And I'm like, I have no idea, homie. I just kind of have a really good idea of what I want to carry and like what kind of a pack that's going to be able to fit in. I could not tell you. If people ask me, what are the cubic inches of that malice truck? I'm like, many?
Yeah.
I don't know, homie.
Oh, dude, I'm right there with you, man. I butchered. I tried to explain cubic inches on one of our episodes, and I just butchered it. And then somebody that listened was like, "Hey, just a heads up, like, loved the episode, but you completely just utterly destroyed the cubic inches explanation." And so on the next podcast, I was like, "Don't listen to me. I was wrong." But it was, I was like, "Oh yeah, you can convert." Because you got liters. Cubic inches and liters, you know, and it's like, But yeah, man, it's like, man, just get something that's going to fit the stuff you need to carry and call it a day. But
yeah, that's the big too. Is people ask me for the class and they sign up. They're like, "What do I need to bring?" Like, I don't have this and I don't have that. I'm like, dude, I don't care if you show up with a red and gray hiking pack. If that's all you have right now, that's fine.
Yeah,
like we'll do concealment exercises and I'll show you that you can actually hide that red backpack.
Yeah,
it is possible. Just because you're wearing a non-camouflage color does not mean you cannot hide. And I'm like, just get it. And there's like some minimums. So one guy showed up and all he had was like a little 3-mag micro rig, and that's all it held. He couldn't hold any of the other minimum requirements that we put out for the fighting load. I was like, all right, man, like gotta put it out there that we hope people would actually show up. But I'm like, if you suffered paralysis by analysis and you couldn't choose what you wanted to get or how to set it up, like you showed up with something. Like it's a start, and you can build upon that from here. You can see everyone else's gear that's in the class, and you can ask the question, and you can build up from there. And that's what he's done. He's been slowly building out all the stuff because he's new to this training and this community. Just like show up with whatever, and that's a big thing about our classes. It's a learning environment. It's not it's not like Tusk from Darcy.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's very much like that's a scenario. Like you go there and you're in scenario and you're doing the force on force thing. I mean, there's instruction to it. And people have asked if we're trying to like compete with them, and I'm like, no. In fact, I think you should come and take our classes and then go to Tusk.
Yeah.
Right. And we had a couple of students who just, by the by, that's how they did it. Is they took one of our small unit tactics classes and then went to Tusk, and they're like, dude, it sucked, but it was way easier for me than the guys who had like no prior training whatsoever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my spiel on the assault pack.
Okay. Yeah, I think I really like that idea of like, just get over here, let's go. You're going to learn, because I think what people struggle from the most is they just don't have the context. It's like this information's out there, but it's really hard to narrow in on the context of, well, why are we doing this? Why does a ruck have to be this way or that way? Why is this color work? Why is that color not? All these different things. And it's like you see it a lot with people that are like, well, just read the Ranger handbook. And it's like, cool, dude. But if you don't have the context, like that military context attached to that, there's going to be gaps. There's going to be a lot missing. So I feel like you come to a class like yours and go through that course. Well, now you've got real life experience. You've got context behind a lot of these concepts, and you can start to put it together yourself. So.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that's what I tell people. They're like, is there any kind of like homework I can do I'm like, Ranger handbook and USMC scouting and patrolling. Like go through those. A lot of the classes that I built, I reference those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, after class, because, PowerPoints are never a student handout, right? It's enough so that the person teaching has talking points to go off of, and you as the student can follow along. Like, what are we actually talking about right now?
Right.
It's a visual reference rather than me standing in front of you and running my mouth, and you're like, what the fuck are we talking about right now?
Yeah.
Oh, the screen says we're talking about noise discipline. Okay, now I'm tracking with what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's like build it off of those, so that way, students can reference that material, but then you're in class and you're taking notes, and it's like, okay, so let me go back and I read this again. Oh yeah, now I remember, like, Blake said this about this thing in class. Like, now I remember, what we were supposed to do. So yeah, they're good references, but it's like you can't take those things as like a step-by-step instructional document.
Yeah.
Because all of those things, if you do a rewrite for any kind of a manual to update it, and by the time it's approved and signed off and redisseminated, you've already moved on. You've already advanced from there.
Yeah.
Like, they're always out of date, which is a good thing, right? I mean, you're always moving forward and progressing, but there's still like decent enough publications that you can kind of go back and just refresh yourself on some of the basics.
Yeah, that's good. So kind of moving away from individual kit, is there any, like, especially for those that might be trying to work with a group and form a team and build that community, what are some levels of kit that might apply to the team as a whole? Like whether that's shared specialty equipment or whatever.
Yeah. So a few things for that. I'm sure you guys probably had the same term, but the aid and litter team.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have that? Yeah.
Yep.
So like the aid and litter team, and that's something we go over in the class. It's, it's one of the fire teams in a squad, or, like a 6-man recon team. You got like a couple of guys who are just dedicated to that. And so one or both of them are going to have, some pull-less litters, or maybe depending on the mission, you have a rigid litter. But something, so like those are going to be the guys that are going to have your litter or litters, and everyone understands that. Okay, so that's the in litter team. So I know if I need a litter, those are the guys I need to get to where I need the litter to be. I know that those are the guys who are going to provide security for the medic while he's doing his work, and they're going to provide security as we move the casualties, and they're going to be responsible for moving the casualties. So kind of getting like those subunit tasks within the team. And that's going to be a big one, is like that equipment. And then depending on your environment, it might be more than just, a litter. It might be a rope kit, because if you are in a mountainous environment, if you've ever tried putting somebody into like a Skedco and then carrying them up or down a mountain, that's not very easy.
No.
It's difficult for you. It's difficult for the patient. But if you have a rope kit and you can, set up a system to allow that litter to just kind of slide or be gently guided up or down the hill, and now you can still maintain really good security, and you can move faster, and you have better control as a leader, like, holy crap. So, obviously your environment will slightly change what that looks like. Communication equipment, from as sophisticated as, radios and, phones with Android Assault Kit loaded on it, to simple as like chem lights and a signal mirror and an air panel, having a redundant means of signaling both near, far, and preferably, if you can, like, kind of looking at like all the horizon communications. So you can set up with, HF and stuff like that, so you can talk good long distances. Comms are really good, but even if all you can do immediately in your group is just the visual stuff and have, some Motorola's so you can talk person to person. And if you've got a couple of fire teams, you can talk fire team to fire team, over a couple mile distance. That's definitely something to start looking at as a group that's, unit gear.
Mm.
Yeah, the rope kit, again, for a lot of environments, not just a casualty thing. We would almost always bring out a 120-foot line and set up hasty rappel to get down, some cliff faces and things like that. Just because it allowed us to move over terrain that, people don't expect you to move over, because like, wow, that terrain, I wouldn't want to walk on that. That really sucks. It's like, yep, which is exactly why I'm going there, because all the bad guys look at that and go, that sucks. I don't want to go there. And so that's where we go. So that way we don't have to worry about being caught.
Yeah.
So, a rope kit and then the knowledge of how to use it can go a long way in a lot of situations. Beyond that, it starts to get, really mission specific. Are you doing reconnaissance and surveillance? Well, then you're going to want spotting scopes, binos, rangefinders. I forget the technical name for a wind meter, but something like a kestrel. That can kind of give you information about the weather. If you're gearing up to be able to go into the attack, which is like, I don't know, it's a touchy subject to talk about in the civilian context, because people can really easily take it out of context.
Yeah.
But it's like, then you're looking at, breaching tools and maybe a breaching shotgun. An infantry attack, it could just be like your E-tool, and like each guy's got like 5 sandbags and every other guy has an E-tool. So when we attack the bad guys on this hill and we push them off, we're going to like use those sandbags and E-tools to like reinforce those positions as we prepare for counterattack, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes very, very mission specific. But comms, aid litter, and a rope kit are fairly universal, I would say.
Yeah, that's good. Those are solid explanations there. I mean, I think a lot of people overlook, especially just random lengths of rope, like tubular nylon, different things like that can just come in so handy for so many, random things. It's like stuff just comes up and it's like, oh, do we got some rope? And if you don't, then you don't. And now you're just ragtagging and trying to figure stuff out. But that kind of stuff, I think, goes such a long ways. Like even just having a ton of 550 cord is like invaluable. It comes in so handy. Not necessarily for climbing, but just for random stuff, fieldcraft stuff. But, well, cool. So as far as getting into the actual sustainment side of things, when you're talking small unit sustainment, you've got your team, you're out doing your thing. Want to start getting into that?
Yeah, sure. Just like the equipment for that, or
equipment concepts, like what do you got to think about? Like obviously things like hygiene, water, food.
Okay, yeah. So then your hygiene equipment, it's something that, like, as soon as I got into the sniper platoon when I was still in the infantry battalion, I was like, I don't need this anymore because we don't have to shave in the field. And so I just didn't pack one. And even the early days of my time in Force Recon, a hygiene kit was like optional. And I was like, well, I don't care about brushing my teeth, and we don't shave, so I don't need to worry about a razor. And I'm not going to be bathing myself. So just, I have a small pack of baby wipes that I can use from time to time. But it wasn't until later on that I realized that I should have an actual kit, because although I'm not trying to keep myself super clean and smelling fresh like I'm getting ready to go out in the town, I need to do enough to make sure that I don't get sick. And you're going to get, scratched up and cut up moving through the brush, and you don't want that stuff to get infected. So you need to be able to keep the areas clean, and a little bit of antibiotic ointment goes a long way. And little things like Band-Aids, because you are going to tear yourself up on the brush. You're probably going to cut yourself opening an MRE, and nick your finger. So like little things to handle that. Also within that, be like some vitamin C tablets, something like that, just to kind of help keep your immune system going while you're out there in the field. I'll carry some rehydration packets, like a liquid IV or drip drop. I'll have a handful of those in my hygiene kit. And those would be like the primaries. Like I'll carry some out that I'll just like stage with my food. And then the ones that are in my hygiene kit are like, I've gone through everything else. And like, those are my kind of last ditch ones that I'll use. Some kind of bug repellent, you should be treating your clothing, but then having like a bug repellent, post-contact wipes for poison oak, poison ivy, like all these little things. You can sit there like, oh man, like I've had poison oak before and it's not that bad. And like, yeah, it's not that bad for a lot of us. But if like you're sitting there and you're itching, you're sitting there and you're scratching and you're scratching, you break the skin. Now you've opened yourself up, for infection. So having that post-contact wipe to kind of help keep the rash down and prevent you from wanting to scratch it and potentially cause further harm. The hygiene kit's a pretty big deal, especially you start really talking like long term.
Yeah,
you may not care that your teeth feel fuzzy after a week in the field, but after 2 weeks in the field, and then is it going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be 3 weeks? Is it going to be a month? So like a simple little, cut off toothbrush, even without toothpaste, just being able to brush that thing on your teeth and knock all that funk off, does a lot towards keeping your gums healthy. It's tiny little injuries that just like nag at you, and they wear you down. They start taking your focus away from where they need to be. So, yeah, hygiene kits are important. I've also started putting like ibuprofen and it's like an NSAID and some acetaminophen inside those kits as well, because you're probably gonna sprain something, you're gonna roll an ankle, you're gonna fall over and land on your wrist the wrong way. So something to kind of manage that while you're out in the field. See what else? Yeah, for water procurement, that's definitely going to be a big one for Sustainment. You get away with like just packing enough water, or always packing for 96 hours. But what happens when the mission goes beyond 96 hours, or what happens when you get separated from your pack? Do you have a redundant means of somehow procuring water? So like in my ruck, I'll carry a gravity bag and filter, so I can just dip that into preferably a stream or a river, something that's moving, and I can refill most of my containers off of that 10-liter gravity bag. And then I have other containers I carry on my body with water purification tablets. You can have life straws, and within that you also have to understand, like, do I have a water filter or do I have water purification? So something like a life straw is a filter. It will filter a lot, but not everything. A water purifier, which is why I like my MSR gravity bag, it's a purifier. It purifies the water. So I don't need to do any other treatment to it. I don't need to filter it and then hit it with purification tabs, or or do it the other way around. That's important to understand the difference between those two, and then having a redundant means on you. So if you do become separated from your sustainment load, do you still have something on your body that you can use to keep procuring water and keep yourself alive until you can get to a point where you have the adequate supplies again? With food, that's one. You're kind of relegated to what you pack out with food. in a tactical environment. And then obviously understanding how to forage can go a long way. But depending where you're at, like you might be able to forage a lot and live off the land comfortably, or you may only be able to find enough to kind of like supplement what it is that you're taking out. You know, if you're in an area that's rich in agriculture, well then depending on the time of year in the harvest season, you might be able to go out and get a lot off the land. And if you're in an environment where you can afford to hunt animal, then yeah, obviously, you know, that's a great way of procuring more food. But that one is the tricky one in the tactical environment because it's hard to hunt in that environment.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's hard to catch an animal by snare. I don't know if, you know, a lot of people out there try their hand at trapping, but it's not easy to catch an animal by snare.
Yeah.
And then, you know, some animal that you catch and is thrashing around in the bush, like that makes a lot of noise. That's going to draw attention. And then if somebody else finds that animal before you do, well, your snare has no compromise.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And you could shoot it, but it's like, yeah, even if you have a suppressor, that still makes a sound that a lot of people are going to be like, that sounded like a gunshot.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, what do you do with that? And then you got to clean it. So what are you doing with all the materials that you're not using? There's a lot more considerations, and that's why it just makes it more difficult to procure more food in that tactical environment. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like super into bushcraft that might be listening. It's like, it's super easy. I live off land all the time. It's like, yeah, but no one's hunting.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very possible to completely live off the land. But when someone is hunting you or potentially hunting you, you know, that kind of changes your options of how viable all of them are.
Right.
So the food thing is tough, and it's definitely worth, you know, outside the military when we have the option, and, you know, you can go to the store right now and you can build out, you know, what you want and have lots of shelf stable and fairly lightweight food stuff that you can pack out. Like, that's great. Being deployed and in the military, you know, and relegated to MREs was difficult. And then you found out that like foraging has an urban aspect to it as well, because there was a deployment and we were not resupplied, and we had to break into a convenience store. And we took a bunch of sodas and candy bars, and we were sustaining off sodas and candy bars for a few days before we were finally resupplied with water and MREs. You know, tasted nice, but like you felt like absolute crap because you're just eating tons of sugar. There's like no nutrients in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
But, you know, we stayed alive. Like, we had the calories to like keep us going, even though we felt like shit, and it would not have been a sustainable diet in itself. It was enough, you know, get us to a point where you could be resupplied. So yeah, that foraging aspect and just understanding like foraging can be, you know, picking berries, or it, you know, might be plucking a chicken's egg from someone's roost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that rationing, like getting in the habit of rationing your food and water, is something to really get good at?
Yeah, in that field environment for sure is like understanding how much you want to take out, and it's a tough balance, because on one hand you want to provide yourself enough that not only you're going to be able to, you know, do whatever the training is that you're going to do, but you'd like to kind of come out of it like as good as you came in. You know, if you put yourself at a caloric deficit, a serious caloric deficit, you know, where like you're going to be burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories a day, and you're only consuming 1.5 to 2,000 calories, like you're going to be a hungry son of a bitch by the time you get to the end of that, and you're gonna lose some things that, you know, you didn't really want to lose. You're gonna not be as strong the next time you get in the gym. But then like you have to kind of find that balance of like, well, I can only pack so much. I can't have 100-pound ruck for 3 days just because I want to eat all the food I have to eat. But you do the best that you can to keep yourself as healthy as possible in that training environment. And then, if you're preparing for that one day where you're in truly austere conditions because you're in the military and one day you're going to be deployed, or you're civilian and you're just preparing for that time where things just might go all to hell, you kind of think to yourself, well, I want to be able to be prepared to live off of a suboptimal amount of calories per day. And I kind of thought about this like with sleep. When I was in high school, I would like intentionally try to keep myself up for days so I could prepare myself for the sleep deprivation. And I was just annihilating myself. And I really wish I could like go back in time and just slap the hell out of 16-year-old me. Like, dude, go to bed, like, get some sleep, like, because sleep deprivation and being able to work off of not a lot of food, like that comes down to your will. Either you have the will and you're like, I'm going to win, I'm going to survive, I'm going to push through, and I'm going to find a way to thrive in this, or you're going to quit on yourself. And then it won't matter if you have 7,000 calories a day worth of food in your run, right? If you just don't have the will to win. So, balance with what you need. If you can figure out like exactly what your caloric needs are, your resting metabolic rate and all that, and you pack as best you can for it. And then it depends on the person. I have found that if I like field stripped all my MREs and I put all the snacks in one sleeve and all the main meals into another sleeve and like try to organize it like that, I would end up just eating all of the snacks. And so after like 5-6 days on patrol, like I'm out of all the snacks and I have nothing but main meals left.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, well, I don't like this main meal, so I'm not going to eat that one now. And then I go to this one. And then, the last 2 days, it's like all the main meals that I absolutely hate. And I'm just like miserable because I'm eating just the worst main meals in the world. So I was like, okay, can't do that. Like I need to actually like strip an MRE and keep those components together. And then like, but then we would do it. So you would strip an MRE and you would eat 2 of those a day. Just like bare bones components that you need out of the MRE, 2 of those a day. And that's, really all you're getting. Eat a little bit more in cold weather, mountainous environment, because you burn a lot more calories. For me, I found I really do need to kind of like separate, everything. So when I pull something out, like this is what I'm eating. It's like I prefer to make my own trail mix and put it into gallon-sized bags. And like, so today, this gallon-sized bag is what I'm eating. And if I don't finish it today, then I start with this tomorrow and I eat this bag until it's gone. And then I go to the next one. And that kind of keeps me on track so I don't overeat. I would rather undereat than overeat, because I'd rather have more food at the end of a mission than have no food a day before I'm supposed to be out of it. So that's kind of been my method for doing it. But how everyone's a little bit different. So how they find their disciplines work for them. Maybe because of how I grew up, I kind of like eat when I get bored. So long reconnaissance missions, like looking through optics all day long, is super boring. And so I would tend to like try to snack all the time. And so I'd go through all the snacks. But if I just have one meal together, it's like, all right, well, out of snacks, I got a meal left, and now it's not an appropriate time for that. So when I rotate out of the OP, I'll eat a meal, and then I got to wait till this evening to break open the next one, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good advice. I think I'm similar. I definitely have to separate things, and Like I have like when I pack my stuff, I have like individual bags that have certain things in them, and I kind of keep them in a place that I'm not just like going for them, because I'm the same way. Like I like food. I like to eat. So if I'm bored or I want to like change the tempo, I'll just be like, oh, I'm gonna eat that beef jerky that I got, you know. And if it's hard to get to, then I'm less likely to dig in and get to it, especially if it's an inappropriate time, like you're saying. Like you can't, you know, you're pulling security or doing whatever, so, or sleeping, you know, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But what about like you were kind of getting into it a little bit, but anything to say on like survival stuff, or like if you got a E&E or escape and evade, anything like that, like stuff that would be smart to think about?
Yeah. So some of the basics, to put in a survival kit, is you're going to want some means of signaling, a means of shelter, a means of making fire, a means of procuring water, and some kind of means for procuring food. Most often that looks like some kind of a fishing kit. And especially with your survival kit, you want 2 is 1, 1 is none. But that's not just a redundancy of items. Also think about the uses of an item. So some high tensile thread and clothespins, you can make fishing equipment with that. You can also repair your clothing with that. If you have a bright orange poncho, that can be used for making a small shelter, and it can be used for signaling. If you actually have like an asset that's trying to find you, you can put that out and use that to make a signal. So things like that, like if you're trying to get items that will give you more than just one use, and that goes for like everything that you're going to pack out anyways, like especially once you're getting that survival kit. And like my true survival kit, it packs down into a little thing. It's about the size of a 3x5 card, and it's maybe a ½ inch thick. And that goes from like the back. Almost every Benny pack I've ever had always has like a little like hidden pocket on the back side of it that sits up against your body. That slides right in there, and it gets zipped up, and it never gets accessed except for the couple times a year I might break it out and just make sure all the components are still good. And then I'll throw extra stuff, inside the rest of the nut ruck, just so I've got more. I've got more storm matches. I've got a spare lighter and 550 cord and all that other good stuff that I'll probably just use like by the by. I use lighters pretty often, use that 550 cord, and then at the end of the mission, get rid of that big lighter, put a new one in, new 550 cord, and all that stuff. But yeah, so a means of signaling, a means of shelter, curing water, making fire, and getting yourself some food are the things you want to look at for your survival kit.
Solid.
Yeah, and that could even you could also add to that with like currency. Having some currency squirreled away. So if you are somewhere foreign, right, and you're in a bad way and you get out of there, if you can whip out some cash and pay somebody to help get you to safety, that could be a pretty useful thing.
Yeah, that's something that I think gets overlooked. I mean, even if you're talking about like local community stuff, it's like, if you're in a bad environment like a Hurricane Katrina kind of thing and you're trying to help, like stuff like that could go a long way, being willing to barter or whatever, and having the means to do so. Could make a friend rather than an enemy pretty quick thinking like that. So yeah. I guess, I mean, you've basically kind of chipped away at everything. The one other thing I was curious about would be, I guess kind of like more specific medical stuff, because you talked about like bumps and scrapes and different things like that, but talking about your big, trauma kind of stuff or major injuries, that's a pretty big part of sustainment. What are you kind of looking at there?
So I carry out a handful, and I put in my hygiene kit. It's, a handful of different size Band-Aids, and some antibiotic ointment. And, again, like mentioned, the post IV contact is kind of in that like little boo-boo kit type stuff. Because you're far more likely in most scenarios to have like little bumps and bruises and cuts and scrapes, and you bruise yourself like you bruise yourself. This is kind of is what it is. Somebody out there might have some kind of crazy home remedy for that. You'd be carrying a pill bottle, but that's definitely where I would make the joke that I just carry a high gauge straw. I'm just gonna suck that up. But when it comes to cuts and bruises, I'm pretty fortunate that I don't get infections easily. Mm-hmm. So I don't need to be like overly concerned about it, but it's still something that I carry so that I can protect it until it becomes a nuisance to do so. And then, I'll just pack it with dirt. But that's definitely something I would recommend. And you can carry your hygiene kit, in your pack. It doesn't need to be like in your pocket. It doesn't need to be in your fighting load, and even something as simple as like, staging bits of tape on items that you're carrying around, like wrapping your lighter in, 100-mile-an-hour tape, or, wrapping some around the end of your ferro rod, or wrapping electrical tape around items. And then if you don't have a Band-Aid, but you've got tape, well, now you've got a Band-Aid, right? And you could, tape a little cut or something up and just keep it protected, help prevent it from getting, infected. And that tape is a lot of other uses. So that makes it kind of almost better than carrying a Band-Aid when it comes to the boo-boo kit. Not a whole lot really into it. Just that antibiotic ointment, some Band-Aids, and then having tape staged around all the objects that you can that are, on your body and in your pack and in your kit. Because that tape would be very useful as well.
Yeah. So as far as like your major injuries, like I guess like your March focused kind of stuff, you just relying on your IFAKs for that. You've already got, IFAKs staged on your kit somewhere, whether it's your fighting load, probably your fighting load, but
yeah, so you should have an IFAK on your fighting load. And again, it's like, what is the mission? Manpower, mission, and environment. If I'm going out alone, well, you might think, well, you're going out alone, so you should carry a lot of medical equipment. Well, how many medical interventions are you actually going to perform on yourself?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I have an ankle kit that I keep in my truck, almost never wear it on my ankle. But I have it in the truck. And for a while I had I had an MPA in there, and I had a chest start, and I was like, hold on, I'm not going to do either of those things on myself. I'm sure as hell not going to expect some random person in the crowd to do it to me, let alone even know I have that on my ankle if I'm unconscious. And I'm not going to do that to somebody else. I'm only going to be able to do like a tourniquet and dressings to limbs and some basic stuff. So I just carry stuff that I know I could apply to myself.
Yeah.
So, go out in that team environment. If you are in that team environment, it's like, yeah, everyone should have an IFAK on them. And you could have some redundancies to it, so like if you're wearing plates, you could have, everyone's got like a medical dangler, and then maybe everyone's got like an extra kit that goes behind their front plate that just has like extra bleeding control and chest seals, maybe, something just kind of supplement the main IFAK. You could do something like that. And then in your assault load, maybe everyone's got an IV starter kit, in their assault load. So you can grab that out and get that started on them, or it can be in your IFAC. We all ran with 500 milliliter IV bags and IV starter kits. It's because it reduced the amount of fluids that the corpsman had to carry. So it made for a pretty robust IFAC, but it cut down on what the corpsman had to carry in terms of fluids, which opened up his ability to carry other more advanced medical interventions. You see it a lot in the military where like the platoon corpsman or the team medic will just have essentially their team bag is like a giant IFAC. It's got like 12 tourniquets and like 4 pressure dressings and 20 rolls of gauze. And it's like, cool, but do you have a chest tube? Like what else can you actually do? Like, you're not just here to carry extra IFAC, and like you're here to do more advanced medical interventions. So if you have someone in your team, it's like an EMT, paramedic, or doctor, or whatever that has an advanced medical knowledge. Well, rather than just having that person carry a bunch of extra stuff, have them carry stuff that is within their skill set. And then if you think you need extra things, then just disseminate that amongst the team.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Super simple. And I think that's kind of it kind of seems to be your vibe. Try to keep it simple and get it explained, man, which is solid. I think that's why it's resonating with so many people, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I try to keep everything like as simplified as possible. Sometimes I think maybe I do it too much in terms of like how I view things, but it's more or less kind of worked out for me up to this point. So, gonna keep with it.
Absolutely. So, kind of, I guess, as we wrap up here, I was curious, and I don't want to put you on the spot too bad, but looking back at your experience in the military, and then more recently as you've been running these classes, what would you say is some of the biggest mistakes that people make in that environment, in that small unit sustainment environment?
I would have to say it's overpacking.
Okay.
I've been guilty of it. When I started off in the battalion sniper platoon, and they're like, yeah, we always pack. But it wasn't, we always packed for 96 hours. It was, we always packed for 48 hours beyond the planned mission.
Whoa.
So if the mission was supposed to go for 4 days, you packed for 6. And that seemed sound enough. Like, okay, because shit happens. So yeah. But if you've ever packed 6 days of water and food on top of all the things that you need to also carry between layers and radios and batteries and everything else you're supposed to carry, that gets really heavy really fast. Like the water that goes in your pack is by far going to be the heaviest thing overall. And you end up consuming a lot more of those items because you're expending all that extra energy carrying that extra weight. And then there's so many other things. The whole 2 is 1, 1 is none, is always said, but so rarely understood. And so you just have 5 of everything in your pack because, the first 4 are likely to break, but somehow that 5th one, that will be the one that doesn't break out of all these things that you're carrying, I probably don't need 4 protractors on patrol. I can just carry 1. And maybe a second one in case the first one just shatters into pieces.
Yeah.
But yeah. So overpacking is a big one. The last sustainment class we did, there were a couple of guys who packed too much. They had 2-man tents and they had camping chairs and I put on the gear list. I'm like, you can have a field knife or a tomahawk or a small camp axe or hatchet. And this guy brought a full axe. like splitting wood, felling trees, axe.
Sick.
And I'm like, all right, like that's going to be heavy.
Yeah.
Really looking at like what needs to be going in each level of the kit. And then do I have a necessary amount of redundancy in the number of items? And then what all of these things can do for me? How many uses does this one piece of equipment actually have? And if it doesn't have more than one use, then you really need to analyze, like, do I need to be bringing this? Well, it's my canteen of water, so yes, I have to bring that. Even though its only use is to hold my water until I drink it, I definitely need that.
Right.
That bag of chow you're bringing, like, probably doesn't have a secondary real function to it, but you definitely need that. Your puff jacket in the cold mountains doesn't really have a secondary function, but you absolutely need that to prevent from going to hypothermia or frostbite. So when it becomes life sustaining, and you're only over like one use, then if that one use is truly necessary, then it's necessary. But everything else, like, I don't really need this. I kind of like, I'm packing it because I want to, or I like it, or I spent the money on this thing and I'm trying to find a way to use it. If it's not necessary, it's not necessary. And it makes every bit of difference. You put on an 80-pound pack and then you put it down and you pull 3 pounds out of it and pick that pack back up. It just feels like you took out more than 3 pounds.
Yeah.
Or you would think like 2 mags in your kit, you're like, 8 mags isn't that much heavier than 6 mags. But then when you take those 2 mags out and go perform the exact same task, you're like, wow, that was a lot easier.
Yeah.
Just by taking 2 pounds off my kit. So always looking to shave down and take the bare minimum with some contingencies expected, and go back to 2 is 1, 1 is none. And people should be set up pretty well.
Sweet. Would you say that a pretty big component or a major eye opener, at least at these trainings, and I know the answer is probably yes for the military, but would be individual fitness, like physical fitness, shortcomings and stuff there?
Yeah, I mean, the fitness is definitely a big part of it. There were guys in the last class, and some were overweight, and it was funny because we saw the overweight guys, and myself and my assistant instructor were like, we're gonna have to kind of keep an eye out for these guys, make sure like they don't get super dehydrated or anything like that. And it was actually a couple of the leaner guys that went down first, because even though they looked like they were potentially more fit than the heavy guys, they were just naturally skinny dudes. They weren't skinny because they watch what they eat and they work out a lot. So no matter what, like, you have to have a level of fitness.
Yeah.
Like hydration is a big one, and it's one of those things that it can't happen the day of, and it can't really even happen the day before. It's like the days leading up to it, and if you just make that part of your lifestyle to like always be hydrated, and then when you have an event coming up, like kind of maybe over hydrate slightly to really prepare for the fluid loss that's going to happen on that event, that's going to do wonders for you. I used to carry creatine chews out to the field, so I'd always be on creatine just on normal basis as like part of my diet, and then I would take little like 5-gram chews tablets. I used to be able to find them at GNC, and every evening I eat a tablet and like drink a whole canteen of water, and that pulled more water into my cells, which helped keep me hydrated for longer. And as a kind of an aside, it also prevented some muscle atrophy. So I would come out of a 5, 10, 15-day op, and I wouldn't be completely destroyed. Like, I would still be close to where I was like in the gym before I left. So that was something I did for a long time, and I encourage it in others. But it was always a tricky subject because people look at that as like, no, if you take that, you're going to get dehydrated. It's like, no, you won't unless you weren't hydrated in the first place. And then, that won't be good for you.
Right. Yeah, that preparation's key for sure, especially for hydration. But I remember learning that the hard way and going through basic and stuff way back when. It's like, dude, it's the week leading up. You got to get that hydration in for sure. But
yeah.
Well, cool, man. I know that we've been talking for a while, and I think you've just laid it all out there. So, I guess as we close it out, where can people find you at? And what's the deets on getting connected with you?
Yeah, so probably the easiest ways, and one that potentially a lot of people are familiar with, is Instagram. So they could find me at Blakewater0326. That's, I guess you call it, my main page. And then there's my business page, which is Maneuver Training Solutions _LLC. The business page is more of me sharing, class dates, but also all like the manual of arms and marksmanship type content. I post through that page primarily. Whereas the Blakewater page is mostly equipment solution type stuff. I need to start getting back into like leadership and some other things. There's the YouTube channel, which is just Blakewater. There's it's not Twitter anymore. It's X. Yeah. Right. I'm on there. I was like a few times a week posting with that. I'm down to like, I don't think I've posted on that thing in weeks, but you can find me there. It's also Blakewater. And then I have a Patreon, Blakewater or Blakewater MTS on Patreon. I also need to get back into the Patreon thing. I haven't really posted anything since I had my surgery to reattach my bicep. So need to get back into that. Yeah, but the primaries are going to be the Instagram and YouTube.
Cool. And then you're running classes pretty regular with Orion Training Group too, then?
Fairly regularly, yeah. Now we have Ben Franklin Range up in Pennsylvania. That's a really good venue for us. So we just finished our last class of the year there, or I finished my last one. We've got a long range class coming up in December at BFR. I'll be doing 10 classes up there in 2024. We've got some local venues here in North Carolina. So if folks are in that region, they should stay tuned to the website and look out for classes that pop up in North Carolina, as well as potentially South Carolina. And we're trying to develop some more venues in the East Coast so we can tap different markets and, limit the amount of driving that folks got to do to get the training. Because we do get people who travel. I mean, we drive 10 hours to get to Pennsylvania for that training venue. We've got people who drive about just as far to come there and train. So
nice.
We're always trying to expand our venues.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, you got anything else?
No, I think he covered everything pretty well.
Yeah, man. Well, again, huge thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you taking the time, carving it out, and being willing to sit down with us and share some wisdom. So big thanks to you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Cool, man. Well, we'll talk later. Thanks again.